My first guest today is an unstoppable advocate for LGBTQ2+ rights and education, a distinguished community engagement expert, and a highly recognized diversity and inclusion consultant. She is Fae Johnstone, the executive director and co-owner of Wisdom to Action, an organization dedicated to youth mental health, community health and wellness, and gender-based violence issues. Based in Ottawa, Faye has tirelessly dedicated her career to creating meaningful change within the LGBTQ2+ community, driving initiatives at local, provincial, and national levels. From leading successful campaigns to making a stand in the face of online harassment, Faye has consistently displayed courage, resilience, and unwavering commitment to her cause. As a trans woman herself, Faye's advocacy is not just professional, but deeply personal. They have leveraged their platform to effect substantial change and promote inclusivity, inspiring countless individuals along the way. It is a real honor to have her on the show today. Welcome to What She Said, Faye.
Hi, Candace, and thank you so much for having me on today. It's an honor for me to be here with you.
I'm thrilled that you're here. So from your perspective, I mean, it's Pride Month, so let's start with this. So what's the sort of the current state of LGBTQ2+ rights in Canada, and what are the most pressing issues that need to be addressed?
That is a phenomenal question. I think in Canada, we've come a long way in the last 20 years, and it's important to recognize that. We live in a world radically different from the realities of everyday discrimination, of state-sponsored homophobia and transphobia that defined the 70s, 80s, and 90s. But at the same time, things are not as well as they could be. Our community is still struggling each and every single day. We've had some really good progress on legislative rights, but social and economic inequities, from high rates of poverty to homelessness to high rates of harassment and hate, still define too much of what it's like to be a queer or trans person in this country. And so right now, again, we're doing better, but I think the biggest issue on my mind today is this unprecedented surge in anti-queer and anti-trans hate, and this recognition that while we've come a long way, much of that progress is unfortunately quite precarious.
Driving this rise of hate we're seeing, and more importantly, how can it really be countered effectively?
So I think the rise in hate is best described as an evolution. I think, Canada, hate has always been here. It's not an anomaly. It's not new. But I think over the last few years, we've seen increasing far-right radicalization all across the world and across North America. That has begun with things like white supremacy reviving itself in bigger and bolder ways in the U.S., that flowed into the COVID-19 pandemic, where we saw this rise in conspiracy theory and a way through which, far-right anti-queer and trans groups could recruit and appeal to a broader segment of the public, because folks were beginning to be radicalized and more distrustful of media, of politicians, and all of those things. And I think when it comes to anti-queer and trans hate specifically, I think there was a recognition that far-right and anti-queer groups could try to segment off certain members of our communities, and that by doing so, they could set the stage for further radicalization and further proliferation of anti-progress and anti-rights rhetoric. And so they realized they could get votes from it. They realized that they could create fear and anxiety, and that could help fuel this broader, anti-woke narrative that we're seeing pushed by elected officials and anti-queer and trans groups all across the country right now.
But if you were just, let's just say an alien landed on Earth and was reading the news and listening to, the discourse, they would think that trans people must be running the world. What is the actual percentage of trans people in Canada?
So the best data that we have comes from Statistics Canada. And I like to preface, I think there's a lot more trans people than any government survey could ever account for. We have a long history of not wanting to be counted by governments and distrust there.
And rightfully so, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But I think, so we're 1% of the population, maybe. Likely a little bit more, in my opinion. And that percentage of the population, again, is, more likely to live in poverty. The best data we have says that 48% of trans people make under $30,000 a year. And so this idea that trans folks are everywhere and that we're pulling strings of power, there are no elected officials at the federal level that are trans in Canada. There was maybe 5 trans folks elected to provincial legislatures. I don't know many trans business owners. I don't know many trans TV hosts or columnists. We are few and far between, and so it is absolutely wild to see these groups imagining us as pulling these nefarious strings of power. And it is actually just another indication of how far into conspiracy many of these groups have fallen.
Well, you have experienced the hate firsthand. You were recently on the wrapper of a Hershey's bar for International Women's Month, which, by the way, I can't find anywhere. And I have been hunting for you all over Ottawa, but I'm going to find one. I swear I will. But tell me about the impact this campaign had on you personally, and then in terms of the work that you do.
So personally, I participated in this campaign with joy and happiness. I was excited to be alongside 4 other young women celebrating all that women have to offer in this world and recognizing how far we still have to go. And my hope in participating was to give some visibility to young trans people, young trans women and girls in particular. And we often are made to walk small in this world. We're made to make ourselves, nice and digestible for others. And I wanted to show that we could stand strong, we could walk tall, and live our best lives. And then the ad went live on March 1st, 2023, and within 72 hours, my entire world changed. I had figureheads from the far right, from Matt Walsh to Ben Shapiro to Mr. Jordan Peterson himself, turning this into an international scandal. Out of nowhere, the hashtag boycott Hershey's was trending. I had my personal information shared on social media. I had my old legal name put out in the world. I had pre and early transition photos used against me, and instantly saw my social media, my inbox inundated with hate mail, slurs, encouragements to self-harm, and so much more. So it was, not a pleasant experience, but I think it really does show how dangerous it is getting to be a visible trans person in this country and in the world writ large. I think the emotional impact was one that I still am struggling to process, because it's absolutely absurd to be, a trans woman who's just hanging out, doing her best in Ottawa, and then subjected to this obscene volume of hate. And to know that there are people out there who don't see me as a human being, who just see me as a symbol of something that they loathe and something that they love to squash out of the public eye.
Little did you know at that time that you were actually at the forefront of a big backlash against corporations. In that time, we've seen now all this pushback on Bud Light in the US and Target, and as recently as Chick-fil-A, notorious in usually their stands against, marginalized communities, hiring a DEI expert, and now they are the subject of all this. Where do corporations fit into this discussion? And Target recently, as an example, sort of backed off. So what do you think we're going to see from corporations? How can they go forward, and in light of everything that's going on?
So I think it's important to recognize, I think we talk about pinkwashing in queer and trans communities a lot. It's the magical experience of, as soon as it's June 1st, many corporate logos become rainbows, and organizations say, woohoo, we need to do more for queer and trans communities. And so I think, those are good efforts, but I think that they often fall far short of what our communities need. And as we see this rising hate, one of our biggest fears, or one of my biggest worries, is that corporations are going to get more reticent to engage with queer and trans communities. We're seeing this effort to bully corporations to avoid talking about us. And you can see the impact that would have if one year corporations are celebrating and promoting queer and trans inclusion, and then the next they're a little bit more scared. That sends a message to their queer and trans employees and to queer and trans shoppers that we're not as welcome as we could be, and that maybe there was a little bit of performativity under that. And so right now, as we see this rising hate, I think we need corporations to speak out louder and to be bolder. I think it's not enough to change your logo to a rainbow. I think you need to be speaking out about rising hate, and you need to be showing your work. What I mean by that is I want tangible efforts to support trans and gender diverse and queer people to thrive in these corporate environments. I want corporations that are helping sponsor and donate to local queer and trans organizations, as many do, but to escalate those efforts because there is a principle at stake here, and it is what kind of world do we stand for? One where we accept and celebrate diversity, or one where that diversity is vilified and where the very humanity of our communities is put into jeopardy.
And how can they push outside of those June boundaries as well? You know, because it's not just June. You're not just trans or gay in the month of June. So what can they do year round to really show that support?
I think part of it is about ongoing efforts internally. So things like queer and trans employee resource groups, things like training, making sure that their health benefits include things that trans and gender diverse people might need, like voice therapy or laser hair removal or things like that. And I also think it's about speaking out and celebrating queer and trans culture. So recognizing days like the Trans Day of Remembrance, like the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, and Transphobia, but then making sure that they're also participating in things like drag events, in pride parades, that they're really present more in our communities than just the month of June. Because as you said, we are gay year round, and our rights should matter year round too.
We're going to move a little away from corporations and let's go into sort of the role of government here because, and you know, educational institutions, as we've seen this month, shocking, absolutely shocking to me was that a school board in York Region is not flying the pride flag. What are your thoughts on this, Faye?
You know, Catholic school boards and queer students in Catholic schools are twice as likely to face harassment in their schools because of their gender and sexual identities. I think that it is deeply concerning that the pride flag is being turned into this symbol of some nefarious agenda when it is about sending a message of support and inclusion to queer and trans students, staff, and communities. We are seeing efforts to roll back inclusion in New Brunswick, where a Minister of Education and Premier are looking at reviewing a crucial policy that supports the privacy rights of trans and gender diverse people. We are seeing efforts to stop municipalities from raising the pride flag across this country. So it is absolutely crucial right now more than ever that we push back against those efforts and stand by this message of inclusion. Because imagine being a kid in York Region Catholic School Board and knowing that your school board didn't bother to stand for you, knowing the message it sends if it isn't willing to do something as simple as raise a flag and celebrate a community that has an important role in Canadian culture.
You know, education. So we've talked about corporations, we talked about government. There's one sort of last little space that I think is we need to talk about, and that's social media. You know, I know, for example, on Twitter, you have your comments restricted to only those who you mutually follow, things like that. What can these social media platforms be doing to protect users from these unwarranted attacks?
I think that they need to lean in often to policies that they already have. So, for example, on Twitter, there has historically been policy protections that you can't misgender or dead name trans and gender diverse people, and that you can't, go around calling people groomers and pedophiles. And recently, I think they've become more lax with enforcing those safety measures.
I'm going to just say it.
Oh, yeah.
Elon has become more lax. Yes. Okay.
Absolutely. So I think, social media platforms, they can reinforce those protections. They can make sure they embed inclusion into their platforms. Things like pronoun options, like we have on LinkedIn and I believe on Instagram now as well. But then making sure that there's a rigorous process to oust hateful accounts. That includes reducing the ability for bots to spam out hate messages. Because I'm fairly convinced that someone behind the scenes is just sending the bots my way, because so many of these accounts have like 2 followers and just pop up anytime that I have anything to say or that another trans person speaks out on anything.
Yeah, there's absolutely way too many bots. I know this from experience myself, even just, in a few things, especially when the convoy was going on, there was a lot of bots on that platform. So let's talk about wisdom to action, because this is a very positive, happy thing. I think it's not a happy thing that you have to do this, but it's positive in all the work that you're doing. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so we are a consulting firm and social enterprise. We work with governments, nonprofits, social services, and everybody that we can to advance gender and sexual diversity, to advance gender justice, and we also help with nonprofit organizational development, so helping organizations do what they do better. And the thing I love about our work is that, there's a lot of downtown Toronto C-suite consulting firms that live and thrive in the business world and upsell you and just want to pop in, make some money, and go about their lives. Whereas we strive to be grounded in the communities that we work with. We're not here to give you a magical corporate solution. We're here to work with you to help you do what you're doing better and to scale your efforts through a grounding in community engagement and anti-oppression. My favorite thing about what we do, however, is we use our platform and our relationships to help fuel advocacy on queer and trans issues, challenging governments in particular to speak up and act amidst things like rising hate, poor health outcomes, and a homelessness crisis that is worse in our queer and trans communities than within the general public.
And my last question for you then is, I think a lot of people, are watching from not in the LGBTQ+, community who are watching all of this, obviously support you, but don't know what they can do personally. So what are some action steps that we can take, not just in June? We need to emphasize this all year round. What can we do to help this community and actually push back on this hate?
Mm-hmm. So I think, we have a new nonprofit called the Society of Queer Momentum that is striving to address this rising tide of hate. And we have a campaign out right now at www.act4queersafety.ca that is calling on the federal government to address this rise in hate. And so I think anyone this month or all year round can go to that website, sign that petition, and send a message of support. But I also think now is the time to be supporting our local queer and trans community organizations, like Kind Space here in Ottawa, or the 10 Oaks Project, or the other organizations all across this country that are doing the work fighting hate, but also supporting our communities amidst all of these inequities that we experience. My last thought really would be to write your members of parliament, your city councilors, your school board trustees, and any other elected official in your community, because we need them to hear from local residents. There are only so many queer and trans people, and there are only so many of us who have the time and resources to spend reaching out to our elected officials. If you, as an ally, can reach out to those folks, emphasize the importance of inclusion and your desire to see your elected officials act, that empowers us to be more able to access these spaces and to get these governments at every level to act amidst rising hate. And that's magic to my ears.
And I think people might say I'm being a bit alarmist here, but you are literally the canary in the coal mine. And if people value their own rights, they should absolutely be protecting yours.
Absolutely. This is about more than just queer and trans communities. If they can succeed in demonizing us, they will do it to others next. We're already seeing reports of cisgender or non-trans women being harassed in bathrooms because they're gender non-conforming. And so this is also about everybody's rights. And it's also about the fact that queer and trans communities exist in every single place and space. If you are a parent, you could have a queer and trans kid. If you are a parent and you want other families to have accepting spaces for their children, you need to be speaking out right now more than ever. This is not just an anomaly or an isolated issue. This is a rising tide of hate that is trying to roll back progress for all of our communities.
Faye, you are a bright light. I can't thank you enough for joining me. I'm going to get all those links you gave during the interview and put them in the liner notes when this goes out on podcast. And I hope we can have you back again someday soon.
I would love to. This has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.